you take a little bit from each of those individuals that you interact with as you go along. And so that's what I try to do now. But I had a lot of help early on in my career.
Welcome to The Last Word, the official AALAS podcast dedicated to connecting and informing the laboratory animal science community. Each episode takes a closer look at recent articles published in our journals, JLAS and LAS Pro, and features interviews with professionals advancing the field. I'm Jennifer Smith, your host. As a laboratory animal veterinarian and the Director of Education and Scientific Affairs at AALAS, I look forward to sharing these conversations with you. Let's discover something new together. Welcome. Today we have a really great episode for you. I am going to have a fun, informal interview with our AALAS president. His name is Dr. Jim Macy. Jim is a friend as well as a colleague. He is a lab animal veterinarian and also a leader in our industry. Currently, he's the director of the Animal Resources Center at Yale University. And I'm going to leave that intro short so Jim can introduce himself, and we're going to spend a few minutes getting to know him. So Jim, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and specifically tell us what you do in your day job.
Okay. So Jenny did a nice job already with the introduction. I'm also a faculty member in the Department of Comparative Medicine, and I'm also the vice chair for clinical affairs in the Department of Comparative Medicine, as well as the attending veterinarian. So my job here, and I've been at Yale my whole career, actually. And so my job has changed over time. And as the director of the Animal Resources Center, one thing that you kind of figure out is that your job shifts a little bit more from the here and now to the future. So one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is making sure the Animal Resource Program has the infrastructure financing that it needs to continue to grow, to update. And, that takes a lot of work, convincing the administration and planning. And one of the things that I have to do is plan along with the university, sort of what's their recruitment plan? How much do they think they're going to grow? And then you have to kind of chime in with what the infrastructure needs are going to be. And so, I spend a lot of my time interviewing new faculty candidates that may be on their second interview to find out, what their animal needs are going to be, because that all plays into the planning. And, it's not that you can't, you all have to pay attention to what's going on now to some degree, but it's the future, because in the end, it's the financing that you need to make sure that you have the right number of staff and the right infrastructure to support the research. So that's what I spend a lot of my time doing now. And I also think, and I come from an academic environment, that if you look at a lot of animal resource directors, that the institutions realize that actually animal research is a big swath of the research portfolio, and it goes across many disciplines. So they kind of figure out that people like me actually know quite a bit about what's going on at the university, so that you end up being more involved in some of the strategic planning, and you get put on these other projects because they realize that actually there aren't too many people that have the breadth of responsibilities, across the research enterprise. I think you see that with a lot of directors, that they spend less and less time directing the program and more time on university sort of initiatives and projects.
Well, thank you so much for that. I have never really heard one of our colleagues describe that job in such a way, and I really love it. I love that you put those words together. It's so empowering, because you're right. As a director, we do a lot of different things. And if you don't have the resources, you really can't run a program. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your shout out to just how well-versed directors in our industry are, and that they really are able to do a lot of different things. And it's almost hard to pinpoint all the things, right? But I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, and you hear it from the staff. That's where you learn, actually. There are your eyes and ears, and you hear a lot, about what's going on, and then that sort of gets translated forward. And so you're really, in many ways only as good as your staff.
Yeah, that is so true. All right. Well, thanks for telling us about your day job. I think people just think the AALAS presidency is kind of the job, right? And so it's so great to hear the background of who these folks are and what they do in their everyday job, because while being the AALAS president is very important, it's also a volunteer gig, right? You have to do something during the day for your job. So this is so great to hear this more about you. We would love to know how you got into this field. Everyone has a backstory. And I know you mentioned that you had been at Yale for a long time in your career, but we'd love to hear how you even got into being a veterinarian, a lab animal veterinarian, and then, how did you end up at Yale?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a veterinarian, and all through high school, I worked for a small animal vet. I also had horses, so I was, kind of interested in, these weren't race horses or anything like that. These were just regular horses. I was interested in sort of the horse side of it as well, and went to college, and then I worked for a year between college and vet school for a subsidiary of DIFCO Laboratories. Jenny, you may remember them. I don't know that they're in business anymore. But anyway, I was a microbiology major. And so I was really working in a lab, making serologic diagnostic tests and other things back. And this is in the late 80s, right? And so, and they actually had, believe it or not, they actually had a small lab animal facility, but I didn't really know much about it. And I didn't have any really exposure to it. And then I went to school at the University of Georgia. And back then, there wasn't a lot of the lab animal program. The lab animal vet there, I think, did one lecture for exotics for us, but there was really not much exposure back then. But, I liked the job that I had working in the lab, and I was kind of thinking about that. And then I believe it was Mel Dennis from the University of Washington was going around to different vet schools. I think they got a grant from the NIH to set up a summer extern program. So I went, and one other classmate, Veronica Maldonado, who is also in our field, were the only two in our class that were interested in lab animal medicine, or at least wanted to hear about it. And so Mel came, talked to us, thought it was very interesting. Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. And so, that was probably like sophomore year, I think. And so I remembered that. And then what happened was Emory's program had just started. Mike Hurkamp was there, had just come to Emory or hadn't been there for too long. And he set up a summer externship program. So between my sophomore and junior year of vet school, I did a summer externship with Mike Hurkamp at Emory. And that was a lot of fun. Then when it came to one of my senior rotations, I actually did go to the University of Washington because I had a program there and did that. And then at that point, I decided maybe this is something that I was interested in doing. And I kind of basically decided not to do the small animal, not to do the large animal because there was a lot of cows, especially in Georgia. So I moved forward and applied to several different residencies, decided to come to Yale, did my postdoctoral residency at Yale, and then started as a clinical vet and then just progressed as time went on.
I love hearing that. There's a lot in that story to comment on. Number one, no cows. I wrote that as a note.
Yeah.
That's something I'm going to keep in the memory bank.
These are not the nice dairy cows. These were all beef cows out running loose.
Okay. So no beef cows.
That hadn't been handled at all. So that was always a challenge.
Oh, I can only imagine. I actually, when I was in vet school, I was really interested in the dairy nutrition, only because that was the only researcher that was really kind of taking students. But yeah, very soon into that, I thought, not sure that's for me. I love it. And I also think that I just love hearing the backstories and how you got here. And especially who were those people that reached out, got you into their externships, and how those are so important. I think it's great that as an industry, we're really trying to get those, to keep those going, right? Which I think you mentioned funding is a big thing, but how fun. And I also think that summer externship with Mike Hurkamp was probably a lot of fun, as you said.
It was a lot of fun. And we all know Mike.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much fun that was.
Yeah. And this was Mike 30 years ago, right?
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So
yes. That's outstanding.
And I think the other important thing to point out is that, when I was coming through, the lab animal thing was really starting to get traction. But a lot of schools really didn't have programs. And if you look at the University of Georgia now, they have quite an extensive program. So a lot of these places that didn't have programs have them now, and the vet school students are exposed to it. And it was really, I think, UC Davis and a handful of other places that actually back then had a lab animal track. It was very rare.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I went to Michigan State and there wasn't much of anything. So I definitely agree. And I love that there's more now and we just need to keep going, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's go way back in time in the Wayback Machine. We would love to know, what was your very first job?
Oh, my very first job? Like
very first
any job
paper
at all?
route. Yeah. What was it?
I worked for Crystal Hamburgers.
Okay.
For like, I don't know, it was probably one summer. Part-time, working the drive-through at night.
Okay. That is a visual.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was.
All right. I got some good notes now. No beef cows and yes to Crystal Hamburgers.
Yeah.
Is Crystal Hamburger, is that I know is more geographically located. Are they still around? I'm embarrassed to say I don't know.
I don't know. I think they may have changed their name to White Castle Burger or something. I don't know if they're still around or not. They're not in the Northeast, I can tell you that.
Yes. White Castle we have those in Detroit. So maybe, yeah. I think maybe you're right. Okay. Yeah. That's really funny. Did you have a uniform in your first job?
I don't think we did. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we did. Maybe we wore aprons or something.
Okay, but no hat that you remember.
Not that I remember.
That's funny. All right, that's awesome. Okay, well, let's do some more fun. What is your best AALAS memory?
So I have lots of memories, but the one that's most recent within the last couple, 3 or 4 years, is the AALAS Foundation auction.
Good
and
one.
The specific memory that I have was Mark Coulin and Jen Asher bidding over something, and I can't remember what it was, but it may have been a mouse pocketbook or something like that. And they were back and forth, outbidding, and it became this bidding war, and Mark finally got it. And after the auction, he gave it to Jen.
Aww. That is a great memory. I love that.
The AALAS Foundation auction, to me, is one of the more fun events at the AALAS meeting. It's raising money for a good cause, and it's a lot of fun.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so glad you brought that up as a memory, because I think sometimes, and I'm hopeful that our listeners will heed this invitation, but I think sometimes folks feel like that's an event that maybe they have to be invited to, or it's kind of a closed event. And we want to make sure everybody knows, if you're at the national meeting, please stay Wednesday night for that event, because like you said, it does a great thing, which is raise money, but it's also a heck of a lot of fun seeing our soon upcoming president be the auctioneer, Brian Ebert, and just to see everybody, the things that are donated are amazing, and it is a really great time. So I'm glad that's a good memory for you, myself as well. Okay, let's get more serious here. We would love to know who your mentors are. Who are these folks? Why? Any kind of thoughts on mentorship? We'd love to hear it.
Sure. Well, most of the mentors I have are all retired now.
Sure.
I will tell you, when I first came here, Bob Jacoby, who was the director of the Animal Resource Program here and the chair of Comparative Medicine, was a real mentor for me and helped me along, and one reason why I was probably promoted in these various positions as time went on. Diane Gertner was the residency program director, and there was just a lot of really nice and helpful folks here at the time. Joe Scott, Abigail Smith, Eleanor Weir, Steve Barthold, they were all very supportive. I think my strategy has been to always learn a little bit from everybody. Those were probably the main folks. But as time went on, I've been through a lot of deans and provosts and that kind of thing. And you take a little bit from each of those individuals that you interact with as you go along. And so that's what I try to do now. But I had a lot of help early on in my career from the individuals I just mentioned.
It's time for a quick break to hear about the AALAS Learning Library. Hey, are you ready to elevate your team's knowledge and skills in laboratory animal science? Well, the AALAS Learning Library is your one-stop solution for comprehensive training. With courses designed for everyone, you can train your entire team in one place, earn valuable AALAS CEUs and RACE CE credits, and take advantage of group discounts to maximize that investment. Getting started is easy too. Sign up for free to access select courses instantly to explore a vast library of resources. Empower your team, stay ahead of the field, and grow with the AALAS Learning Library, your trusted resource for laboratory animal science professionals. How do you feel about mentorship now? As you now, like you said, kind of in your stage of career of becoming a mentor, how do you feel about that, and how do you fit that in to your busy life?
Yeah, so it is a challenge to do that. And what you try to do is when good examples come up, you try to use those to sort of explain how you might approach it. Because, it's like anything else. Not everybody's perfect, and we all do this all the time. You don't want these to be punitive anyway, but it's like anything else. And anytime there is a challenging situation, you want to use it to help folks as they go further in their career look at the situation and figure out a way to try to address it, because each one is different. So it's really that skill set of negotiating situations to me, and it's a big challenge in our field because on the one hand we're asked to facilitate research, on the other hand we're asked to be the guardians of the animals, and in some cases that sets up some conflict. And I think that using those examples about how to negotiate that so that you are facilitating the research, but yet you aren't letting animal welfare issues continue on, and really how to approach that. And again, each time it's different, but I think those are good learning situations, and I try to take advantage of those when I can to demonstrate maybe how one could approach these and the different ways you might approach it, because again, it's situationally, it's all, as you know, different.
Oh, I agree. I love how you summarize that and just kind of that balance, right, between what we're asked to do, get research moving forward, and also I love how you say the guardians of the animals. I've never really heard it that way, but I love it. Yeah, agreed. Well, I think your mentees are very lucky to have you. So whoever those folks are, hopefully they're listening and they know how fortunate they are to have you as a mentor. Okay, so here's something interesting we thought we would ask. What is one or two, we won't limit you, but what are some things maybe that you would like to maybe see changed in our field?
So I guess if I thought about the number one thing is how, and again, I'm coming from the academic environment, but I think this probably applies in many cases, is really how these programs are funded. Because I really think that the problem that happens is that often there's money for a project to move forward, and there's a lot of impetus to do that. But when it comes to funding the infrastructure, oftentimes I know on the federal government side, there's really not, relative to what needs to be done, there's really not a lot of it. And as we know, a lot of the animal welfare, especially like when you're talking about non-human primates, infrastructure is so important to provide the appropriate space and the complex environment and all that. And I really feel like that in many ways, there's so much more we could do if we had the money to do it. I don't know if that's a recognition problem or it's just flat, there's not enough money to go around, but I really, really would like to see the infrastructure side of it funding change so that we can do what we need to do. And right now it falls mostly to, on the academic side, to the institutions to come up with the money. And I really think there needs to be more of a centralized source for that. I don't know on the pharmaceutical side how that works either, but my guess is the infrastructure funding is always a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great summary. And I think coming from the pharma world years back, I think that money has probably dried up somewhat as well, like you said. So I think it's probably a concern for all aspects of our industry. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. All right. We would love to know what is sort of one or two things that you really want to accomplish this year as AALAS president.
Well, there's a couple of things we want to really take a good look at. And the first thing is really looking at starting to develop a strategic plan for the organization, because right now we're really at a crossroads. The field is changing. There's lots of things happening, and some of our big organizations that we interact with, lots changing on that front, whether it be the regulatory front, the funding front. And so we know that automation is coming along, and really taking a look at what AALAS members are going to need to advance their career. And I think that a lot of the traditional tracks that we have in terms of training are great. But I do think that as these programs get bigger and more complex, and there's logistic issues and automation and all of that, there are really other aspects to our field than the traditional husbandry and veterinary care that are really starting to emerge as being some future demand that we really need to, or even a current demand that we really need to respond to. So we're going to be taking a look at that, and slowly but surely. And this is the kind of thing that will take many years to roll out, but really strategically. And it's not that AALAS hasn't looked at aspects strategically, various aspects of their programs strategically, but I think what we want to try to do is start to put all of that together.
What a great summary.
And I would like to start that, realizing that this is going to have to go on for some time.
Thank you for summarizing that so well. And I really appreciate that you see the need for it to kind of evolve over, several years. But I really appreciate also that you're willing to take that on. That's fantastic.
And Jenny, it's just not me, it's the board of trustees. We're going to all go through some board training shortly here that will help emphasize, board responsibilities, one of which is strategic planning. So we're going to be spending together time on that starting in February, and then again at the meeting in June.
Oh, that's great. And thank you so much for also highlighting that for our listeners, because some of which may not know sort of all the behind the scenes, how that all works. So I love that you added that. Thank you. Well, let's see. We're getting kind of close to the end here. I have a fun one for you. Do you have a favorite quote, a favorite saying that you've picked up along the way, or from a book, or we would love to know?
Oh, Jenny, I have many of these.
Oh, I bet you do.
I have many of these. And one of them is, it didn't happen yesterday and won't be fixed tomorrow.
Nice.
We enter a field where we know there are going to be issues. Animals are undergoing procedures where there's going to be problems and complications that will occur. And so in some ways, when we enter into this field, we are setting ourselves up. We know that complications are going to be induced. So I think this field selects for people that like to solve problems. And you could say that for many fields, but I really think that this field does that. And so what happens is you automatically want to solve a problem the minute that you see it, right? Mm-hmm. And in some cases, that's great, and it does need to be solved on the spot. But in other cases, what you want to do is solve the problem, but solve the problem in a manner that is consistent with a direction that you want to go in. So in other words, you want to be strategic about solving the problem so that you can build on future initiatives. And that didn't happen yesterday, won't be fixed tomorrow, to me kind of reminds me of the fact that you really do need to sometimes step back and look at the problem before you jump into solving the problem. And again, it's, some problems you do have to solve right away, but some of them, they benefit from a little bit of analysis and planning.
Wow. I love that. And I think that's a great quote. I bet if I asked the folks that work with you, they would say that that's something you say a lot. So I love it.
It is. The other thing that I say, the corollary to that is, the road to hell is always paved with good intentions.
Another good one.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Oh,
and you want to avoid that if you can do that.
Oh, this has been so much fun. I have just really enjoyed getting to know you better, and I know our listeners will as well. So we always ask one final question, and it's usually around kind of advice giving. So since we're in this mode, I'd love to ask you what advice you would give to somebody brand new in this field, whether at any job level in the field. What advice would you give them?
So To me, one of the key job skills, especially in this field, is communication. And I mean, a lot, that goes for a lot of fields. But, when you take a job in a lab animal program, or even in veterinary medicine, you usually start because you're interested in the animal part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because whether it's in veterinary medicine, there's a client on the other end of the animal, or there's an investigator on the other end of the animal, in our case, really to be effective in your job, you really have to communicate. In our case, we're communicating sometimes under conditions where there may be a little bit of conflict, right? And so being able to do that in a way, the more effective you are in that communication, the more likely you're going to have the outcome that you desire. And so to me, that's a key thing in any field, is really working on the communication piece, because, in the end is a major factor in outcomes, I think.
Oh, here. I just absolutely love this. I loved speaking with you today. I loved your answers to these questions. And gosh, I'm just wishing we could, keep going and espouse about our philosophy of our industry and all these things. You are a wealth of knowledge, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for stepping up to be the AALAS president. Our listeners, I think, really have enjoyed getting to know you a little bit better. We all know your love of cows and crystal hamburgers, but we also really got to know you a lot better, and to just know that AALAS is in great hands, as it always is, but it's so nice to get to know you better. So thanks for being with us today.
Sure. And it's been fun. And I hope that the listeners get the opportunity to come to Long Beach. As you know, that's a new site for AALAS. And so that's November 9th through the 13th. And if anybody's interested in volunteering for the meeting, keep in mind that our special topic seminars are due March 15th. The abstracts, whether it's a poster session or a platform session, are due June 1. And there are many other volunteer opportunities. And you can go to the Join and Connect tab on the AALAS website and go to the Get Involved. And there's a volunteer form. Please fill that out.
Fantastic. Thank you for all that additional info for our listeners. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Last Word. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to leave your feedback in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more great content. We encourage you to submit your research manuscripts to our journals, JLAS and LAS Pro. We're always looking to feature impactful studies. You can also connect with us on our social media channels or email us directly at info@aalas.org. We appreciate your listening today, and we'll see you next time on The Last Word, an AALAS podcast. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.